much for joining us today. This is going to be an exciting discussion now that you're here to add to it. I want to welcome everybody to Assisting Hands Home Care's book chat, our monthly exploration of what's new and engaging and educational from local authors for the most part. And we're really excited to have Diana Tokaji here to talk about two books that she wrote, Six Women in a Cell and Surviving Assault. We're going to get to those in just a few minutes as more people come in. You know how it is. I got to admit everybody. And so I want to make sure that most people are on board before Diana does her thing. So I'm going to start by just telling you why I do this. So one of my favorite pictures of my mom and dad, that's actually their wedding picture. My mom was a Depression bride, and wearing white wasn't an option. So she was in a green suit, apparently. I never saw it. It had been given away to help some other woman get married by the time I knew to ask. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my world, I've been in this field of creative healing for aging for about 35 years. And over that time period, I have used so many different modalities to help people feel better, including yoga and breath work and art, visual art, and movement and poetry. And to much of that, I owe thanks to so many mentors like Diana, who is an expert in the field of yoga and poetry and dance, and is now quite the published author. So it's really exciting to continue to connect our lovely web of friendship over the years through all these different things. And, you know, with Assisting Hands, it's been really helpful to have all these tools in my toolkit because we're dealing with a lot of families in crisis who haven't actually made a plan how they're going to help their family member who now has just returned from the hospital or who has dementia and they need a break. So we're able to communicate with them on all sorts of different levels. And we try to help our caregivers learn how to use those most intrinsic values that they have learned innately, like singing and movement and making art in all sorts of realms to help ease the time for their loved ones. So let me tell you a little bit about, I'm happy to answer questions, by the way, about Assisting Hands later, but we're going to focus our brief time together on Diana. So let me just close a few windows so I can better see you all. There we go. So as I mentioned before, Diana is a dancer and a choreographer and a writer and a yoga therapist. And she has unfortunately survived and was frankly strengthened, I think, by surviving assault and trauma herself, and has chosen to write about that to share with us not only the crazy experience, but also in a second book, how to heal from that. What it was that how it was impacting her life and her family, and then how she could bring that back. And this is why she's such a wise woman, because she didn't fall down the rabbit hole completely. I know she was down there, but she came back to surface and wrote these two books so that she could help other people feel better about themselves and learn more about the immense odd hatred and conditions that we are living in our precious America today. So welcome, Diana.
Hello. Amazing how you captured in words quite a lot, Patricia. Hats off to you.
Hey, I've been doing this for a few months now. So it comes easy.
And welcome, everybody.
So Diana, tell us a little bit in your own words, how this book started. You know, I know book 2 came out before book 1 kind of thing. But how did this experience develop, and how did it end up being a book? And, you know, what do you see as sort of the goals of how you would like this to experience to educate other folks?
Wow. Okay.
I know it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I keep feeding that back to me because there are a lot of directions I could go in. First of all, welcome to all of you who are here live. That's really lovely. I don't usually get a live audience in a podcast, so that's really sweet. And also anybody watching the recording, feel free to write to me after if you have a question, because this is a brief, you know, discussion about a life's work. So we won't cover everything by any means. And I realize also that as we speak in general, we are also individuals. So each of us listening has, you know, a particular personal background from which they listen. And that may mean that certain topics will be a trigger, or certain topics will be really a balm to your heart, you know, of being seen by somebody else. And that is certainly some of the purpose behind my books. The first book I published, this is kind of a scrappy marked up version, but this one in my computer, I call book 3 because it's the third book I wrote, but it was the first one I published. And it's called Surviving Assault, Words That Rock and Quiet and Tell the Truth, Resource for the Living. And what's unusual about it and what forced me to write it is that in my field, in the field of yoga therapy, and also the field of psychotherapy and the healing arts, we're generally prompted towards the word PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or trauma as a reflection on a past trauma. But what do we do when it's acute, meaning when it's right there in your face, you're in it? So, for example, a psychotherapist who recently referred somebody to me did so because she works with past trauma. And she was looking for somebody who might work with, in this case, a young woman who unfortunately was assaulted. And what do we do with that right then, right? How do we be with somebody right then? How do we be with ourselves right then? And when I use the word assault, I mean it in quite a ranging way. So for example, in my other book, there's an article in there that I quote, and the article is titled Assault on Justice. Or one time I heard Stacey Abrams speak in an interview, and she was saying, this is an assault on the right to vote. So we can have an assault on our systems from illness, an assault on our hearts from a hurt, or an assault to our body. There's also an assault to our rights or our moral code. So it is in that, it is all that generated me writing, quote, the first book, the one that I felt courageous enough to publish. Really a strong desire to write directly to an assault survivor who might be in a rather hairy personal place right now, and to have that book on hand as well as other supports.
So I want to circle back to how you write. And one of the things that I love about the surviving assault is in the very beginning, you tell the reader, and I'm just going to read it out loud because it's much better coming from you. It's, the first writing must be gentle and not even on computer. Waves of sleep wish to crash over me, drowning the project, fogging over the writing as it tries to emerge. But gentle, if we are gentle, the right words will unsubmerge and emerge. And I think that's just a beautiful way to tell the audience today and in your book that this had to come from a really deep, sweet place or it wasn't going to happen. And Diana is nothing but transparent and open and revealing. And as an author, she's not hiding behind the book. She is telling her story. And it's very, very powerful that way.
Well, and let's be real. The act of writing and publishing is not a passive or a gentle sport by any means. Like anything else, it really takes willpower and courage. So this moment in this book, and it's quite an interesting process how this book was written. I'd given many workshops and had published articles about the protocol I use with assault survivors. And so I had a lot of the neuroscience, the research, the PowerPoint, the teaching behind me. And that's the book I thought I was going to write. And I went away to do that. And that's not the book that came out. This is the book that came out. And so sometimes we do all the work for something, as you all know, maybe all the scales on the piano that a jazz improviser might practice that are just playing the brass tacks, the donkey work. But then there's this free spirited thing that you hear at the person's concert, right? Similarly, that free spirit is what I tried to access when I did finally write this book, but all the years of hard donkey work were behind it.
Oh, that's crystal clear in this book too, because you bring to it so many different modalities. So how many of you are familiar with the term yoga mudra? A show of hands. Okay, so Diana, just say a little bit about, I don't want you to go into the whole hoo-ha, but share a little bit about what that is, because that has such a big place in this book.
Yeah, so I'll just turn to where I define that in the book. Mudra, a tool for life. And indeed, when I found Mudra, it was a gift of creating strength inside myself. What is a mudra? A gesture or seal in ritual dance and ancient practices, so thousands of years old, that can affect or seal in specific energy. Mudras are ancient hand gestures from Hinduism and Buddhism, primarily. They create a focal point. They may support us at great time of need. They may shift our thoughts, our energy, our muscle tone, our breath. They can be done sitting, standing, in a yoga pose, and anywhere we are. And I mention that in part because even, those of you who may work in hospice care or has been with somebody in a hospital bed or in a wheelchair, the power of touch with that person. One of the hardest things about the pandemic was having to inhibit that connection. And we all felt that. We all noticed what it was like to not be touching and touched. So mudra is a way of us connecting to ourselves. So here's just an example we can do together. Would you like to?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'll do one that's not in the book because it's kind of interesting. So just maybe take a moment to rub your own hands it just intuitively, however you want. If there's a particularly stiff place or tender, and otherwise just try to cover a lot of space in the palms and in the knuckles and the fingers, just noticing your own hands. And then just make fists for a moment. So we're just kind of warming up our hands, and then stretch and make fists. And if you want, you could add your tongue as you stretch out, which is also a type of mudra, not a hand gesture, but a mudra. And fists, notice maybe your stomach contracts as you make fists, and then stretch the tongue out. Exhale. One more time, breathe in and exhale. And then bring the fingertips toward the thumb. So everything, it's just making like a little gooseneck. And then send the index finger up. Okay, I'm going to push my screen away a little bit so that hopefully you can see me, but my arms might be off screen a bit. So this is a mudra, Hansi. And if you bring it up a little higher, even if you disappear from the screen, so that your elbows are about the height of your shoulders, do you start to notice that this is becoming physical? And of course, if this isn't comfortable for you, you adjust it to what is. This mudra can be done with the index finger or with the pinky finger. The index finger is said to be the wind, whereas the thumb is fire, touching all the other fingers. So notice what the breath is like as you're up here. Maybe let your eyes cast elsewhere beyond the screen, maybe up slightly. And just let a few breaths in and see if it doesn't change your breathing. And then just relax your hands so one hand comes to your heart chest and the other hand on top of it, Hridaya Mudra. And let your eyes soften, whether gazing downward or inward or closing. And allow the hands to receive the heartbeat. Allow the heart to receive your own gentle care. Feel your breath move into your hands. Maybe even shifting the focus to your heart's desire, to a longing. And perhaps even to the reassurance to oneself that you're here for yourself, you're listening, you're seeing. And then let's contrast that with a more powerful mudra, one more. And this one, I'm going to lift my hands up, but it will end up being in your lap. So bring your palms together in what's called Anjali Mudra, or a prayer. I'm going to move my hands here so you can see them. Okay, but they're just in front of you. And then, again, I'm moving them here just so you can see with a plain background. And then spin them with the palms still touching. Just spin them until they're still flat, palm to palm, but sideways. So it's horizontal now. And then as you slide them apart, so yeah, palm to palm, as you slide them apart, let the fingers hook together. And then lower this down to your lap. Let it be comfortable. Let the breath come in, inhale. And as you exhale, give a little tug, but don't let the fingers part. Let them stay locked. And as you inhale, let up a little bit so it's softer, it's not pulling. Relax your shoulders. And as you exhale, give a little tug. And what do you notice? Do you notice any change in the muscularity in your body? And again, breathe in, release a little bit. And exhale, tug, and just keep the tug for a moment. Because this mudra, Ganesha, is something I used frequently when I was writing 6 Women in a Cell, because I was scared. I was scared beepless to publish it and to tell the truth of what happened. So notice if you don't feel some alertness from this, some maybe it registers as tension, but also of a wake up to the muscles, a strength. Nod your head if you feel any of that. Some tone. Yeah. So this is a mudra that might generate confidence in the body.
I'll say something.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. For the first mudra with the hands up like that, it caused my heart to start beating very rapidly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when I put my hands over my heart, then I was able to bring it down and, you know, experience a little more resting place. And then with the other mudra, with the tugging and the loosening, I don't know why, but that just gave me joy. It just gave me joy. It put a smile on my face. So thank you. That was my experience.
Thanks,
Oh,
Carol.
that's wonderful how you covered so much. And I just want to comment. So if I am feeling depressed and I do Hansi, and yes, whenever we lift our arms above our head and our heart, we increase our heart rate. And that can be a really good thing if we're feeling down. So simply lifting the arms up, whether or not you do Hansi, it will increase the heart rate and will wake one up and wake one's spirit up as well. So thank you for capturing those 3 and also for illuminating the shift in the cardiovascular system. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Anybody else want to share real quick? Or I'm gonna get Diana to talk a little bit more now as a segue to 6 Women in a Cell.
Thank you.
I'd love you to give just a 2 or 3 sentence overview of what this story is.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit more about what's in the book.
And you asked how it was written too, and they are the same thing. So when I was assaulted by the police and incarcerated for one very long night, I shared a jail cell with 5 other women, hence the title, 6 Women in a Cell. And when I came out, I was I left with charges of having assaulted the police, which I had not done. And I also left with a driving, I don't really know how to call it, movie and recordings of all my interactions with the women. They were seared into my brain, each one of them. Baby, Alexa, Richmond, the social worker, Mud. And we had touched each other as strangers. There was no way to connect again thereafter. And I felt very compelled to tell each of their story. I also, in time, felt compelled to tell my story. So I did so through the stories of each of those women. Hence, the first chapter is called Baby, and it begins with her story. And then it drives into a sort of, well, it begins to tell my story, but it shows how difficult it is because I'm muted at that point. I mean, I feel mute in my body as, and so you hear that story. Should I read a little bit of Baby or the intro?
Let's give a little bit of context to this though, because it's, you know, that's a lot to say and everybody's kind of like, what? She was arrested and spent the night in jail? What? You know, that's a lot to say to a group of people. So about how long ago was this?
This was 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago.
And in what part of the country?
Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay. And, you know, is there anything else you want to share about the moment of that event, just to give a little bit of context to where it goes?
No.
Okay.
I think the book, you know, one of the reasons for writing the book is that to tell the story beyond the subtitle, a story of sisterhood and survival after police assault, to tell the story in a summarized way beyond what I've said would be quite difficult. And it really, as those of you who've read the book know, it really takes the entire book to understand what happened. And even since publishing the book, I've found out yet more of things that happened that night. But yeah, so that's...
So share a little bit of the beginning.
I'll read a tiny bit of the intro.
Okay.
The women stood in a jagged circle in my deadened brain. No one else would ever know they had gathered, that they could tell my story. We were raw, naked, transparent. We were strangers, yet we knew how to stand in presence, how to move in toward the other or back out. The night was long, shock had numbed us, our contact was random, 2 of us, 5 of us, 3. Conversations took seconds, and I will never see them again. There is no way to just stay in touch. They remain like the weird halo after a flashbulb, the zzz image hanging in smoky air hooked their demanding witness. I'd be surprised to go back to the cell and see we are gone.
So as you can tell, Diana has a very passionate voice. And what I like about each of the women's story is that she chooses to use their voice for each of their stories, which is wonderful. And then because this happened at a time when there was a lot of awakening about police brutality and unacceptable practices in this country, she actually delves into several stories to sort of give the picture context. And I think that's also a really powerful section. I don't know if that was originally part of the book plan. I know a lot of books tend to flow, like you said before, you learn all this information and then you put it into a book. You don't know what's going to come out next. But I think that was really important to hear as well. And then there's also areas where there's poetry in the book. I don't remember there being any mudras in the 6 Women in a Cell, but maybe. I can't remember that. But it has that kind of feeling of a patchwork quilt, and it's pieced together just beautifully. And each individual story is amazing on its own, but then when they're linked together and created into this whole experience, it's quite daunting.
Thank you. Yeah, you're accurate. It did make it all the more important to publish this so that people would see what happens, how an escalation with the police can come down in a totally innocent situation. And also how that can be a slippery slope to incarceration. So that was really important to me to share. And it became all the more important, but all the more frightening to share as possible retaliation was in the mix. And as the whole country was in such a volatile circumstance. So I'm gonna read a little piece of a poem that's in there. Most of the book is not poetry, it's story about the women and about what happened, and it's very personal. But if you give me a thumbs up, Patricia, I might just, is this okay?
Yeah. So
this poem, I spent about 5 years writing this poem. It's called Post-Assault Prescription When I Fear My Spirit Dying. And it's dedicated to Coretta Scott King and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and to my parents. And the reason that I want to read it is because even though the book is quite real and intense, it's also important to see within it that I turned to sources of strength to survive this. And so the reason I'm reading this poem is because there was a moment of such depletion that I really didn't think I would survive. And at that moment, my own tricks weren't working. And so I turned in my mind to the ancestors, my departed parents, and the kings who had survived much more than me in their lifetimes. And so their spirits imbued me with strength. And so this is the second half of this poem, which won the Sonia Sanchez Langston Hughes Award from Split This Rock in 2021. And to me, what it's about is the will that is required of us at the 11th hour when we're really kicked down, when we really don't want to continue. And hence the theme, even now. Even now we have to turn to our will and our strength. So this is the second half. The heart is a blanket that lies soft to the spine. She whispers to the pounding heels, now, even now. Face rosen with a swelling of terror, stomach a gutter of moral injury, hair torn ragged from violation in this backyard. Silence is the heart's banner in 200-mile-per-hour fear. She pulse flashes in sky fire across my lacerated faith. She glares down the clutch of despair in my gullet, singing glorified lyric over hammering percussion. Find silence, garner power. And sweat-soaked in prayer, incredulous with doubt, hardly the soaring bird and beg kneeling ancient in the muck, I hear her start this odd duet of continuance. Tether, tether, she whispers, heels to the molten, then let open wings. And I, in my mammal weight, wonder, now, walking in the bones of a distant girl, now, mad gravel between two lips. Even now, she answers mercilessly, as if it's simple, as if it's known. Even now.
It's such big work. I hate to have to skip around so much, but I feel like that piece alone we could spend an hour or two talking about, and that's only the second half of the poem. But I did want to say to those of you, I don't know how many of you have read the book actually, so give me a quick hand up if you have. No. So this is good. You can all go out and get your book. But this is one of the few books where you read the acknowledgements and you realize the power and strength Diana has been able to pull together from her family and friends and from the ancestors and unknowns, people that were just strangers to her before and then came to her through this horror. And then there's also a section in here with lots of resources, which I think is super important for any book like this. And she talks about her work using yoga therapy as a complementary early intervention for the acute stage following assault or trauma. And I know that you've done some consulting work on that. You mentioned it at the beginning of this call as well. But I think that is hugely beneficial. I mean, as a person who's worked in the past with victims, it's like they need so much support. And isn't it great to know that there's somebody who's created a yoga practice for exactly that? How to get back in touch with your body so you can stop the quivering or feel the quivering and shaking and discharge the emotions that you need to discharge. Very powerful. And then of course, there's a last word in here that I won't talk about because I mean, it's just, I would give away too much, but you know, lots of good discussion pieces in here. If you have a book club you'd like to do this with, I'm sure Diana would be happy to talk to you about, you know.
Yeah, I love those.
Sentences and words. And of course, what I also love about this book is that there's lots of blank pages in the back to write your notes because I found myself wanting to scribble things and come back and go forth and come back. So a good read, a brilliant resource guide in surviving assault as well. And I'm just going to open it up to questions and see where we're at.
Yeah, great.
Anybody want to jump in?
Questions or thoughts or curiosities or bafflements? Anything you wish to share is fine.
And if you want to put it in chat, I'm happy to ask for you. Go ahead, Leora.
Hi, well, thank you for sharing all of this, Diana. I haven't read the book, but I'm very intrigued. And I used to be a criminal defense lawyer. So this topic is, you know, near and dear to me. It sounds like what you endured was a period of 24 hours and, you know, a connection within that relatively short period of time that you later wrote about. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, the assaultive part, I would say, was 24 hours, but the charges included a maximum of 13 years in prison that I left, you know, so there was, you know, and the fact with any assault, as you would know, is that the lasting repercussions are legal, financial, relationship, body, pain, executive function, et cetera, one is definitely changed from an assault. Mm-hmm.
So this covers the time period also during which the charges were pending and the story around that as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Facts always come out when people ask questions or have comments. Thank you.
So I'd like to, oh, go ahead, Eleanor, go ahead.
I was interested in your poem because my work is in Emily Dickinson, who had a lot of trauma, wrote about a lot of trauma, and some of what your imagery in there, the hammering percussion environment of the trauma, the effects of the trauma, sounded like hers. I was wondering what poets influenced your writing of that, and particularly if she did at all.
Oh, that's a great question. Years ago, like almost 50 years ago, when I was in college, I was honored to to have a tutorial with the poet Stan Rice, and I had to audition for that tutorial, and at the time when I was interviewing with him, I told him I really haven't read any poetry. I really don't know any of the poets. I'm pretty illiterate. And he didn't take any notice of that. But in our first interview, when he was commenting on my poems, he said to me, you know, this is reminiscent of Dickinson and of Howell. What's his name? The name escapes me. Famous poem, Howl by
Ginsberg.
Thank you. And I hadn't read either of them. So I said to him again, well, I haven't read either of them. I tried to tell you I'm an illiterate poet. I watch, I listen, I read what I want to read, and I write. I write from myself. And in fact, I kind of starve myself from other reading when I'm writing. So in answer to your question, I'm honored. Thank you. I don't know the answer.
There's a tonal similarity in some of your imagery. It was wonderful.
I'm really honored. And you know, the fact is, this is true also in the field of trauma, that a protocol that I may have come to completely myself out of desperation with my own body, it turns out that somebody in Timbuktu has also arrived at, maybe in a slightly different version. So this universal thread is just constantly there between all of us, isn't it? Through our art, through our desire, through our speaking, through our protests, our actions. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Thanks, Ellie. So I wanted to ask a final question about what's next for Diana. Is there something on the pipeline? Is there, I mean, I've seen part of this story done as a dance, which was very powerful. I'm just wondering what's coming up.
Yeah, the dance performance was a fundraiser so that I could publish the book. And that was so helpful. But I've written 2 other books. They've been sitting in my computer for a while. One is a collection of my essays. The other is a collection of my poems. And when I can stand to be at the computer again, I will edit them. I found I was kind of repelled from the computer after the many, many hours and years this took. But some of my deepest current work is the one-on-one work I do with women as a yoga therapist. That is some of my most devotional and successful work. In October, I'm leading a training on acute trauma care for a group of therapists. And yeah.
It sounds lovely.
And I keep moving, keep creating.
That's great. Diana, you have opened up so many avenues today and made us think about so many different things. Last chance for sharing, if anyone has a comment. Irene, take yourself off mute, honey.
Oh yeah, hi. Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
thank you so much for sharing so much, Diana. I have a question. If you, this happened 6.5 years ago, if you were to be there for yourself, when you came out of the cell, what would you say and what would you do looking back that would be most helpful for you?
Wow, what a beautiful question, because I got out of the cell at about 4:30 in the morning. And I describe all that in the second to last chapter, I think. And that in itself was traumatic, to suddenly be unlocked and just left in the dark in a parking lot with no phone, no money, no ID, nothing. my sense about that moment, and also about directly after the police assault, when I was handcuffed, was that if at some juncture along that way, somebody had held me, and I don't mean a quickie hug, I mean like my two sons, the way they hug, you know, like a really good hug. I think that would have really helped stabilize. But continuing from a coldness and to a coldness, to a coldness, to a coldness was very isolating. And that's a great question. I think deep holding touch and connection would have helped. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So just noticing in our bodies, as I'm sure Patricia's about to close, just, you know, I didn't go into the heavy here, but still it's enough. And so just like taking a breath and letting a long exhalation out together. Breathing in and just falling out breath. And just kind of, you know, swiping it from our own bodies so that we don't, you know, we don't walk away carrying this, carry some of the depth that may inform you or may connect to you, but please don't hold my hurt. I've worked through mine. You know, I'm not saying it's over, it's never over. I walk with this as part of my life, and now dedicating some of my life to supporting others who might be in a similar place. But you don't have to walk away with that weight at this moment.
Well, thank you, Diana, for giving us that closure and grounding. I want to thank Musa and Irene and Carol, Andy, Leora, Ellie, Sylvia, and Jennifer for joining us today. It's been a delight to be able to speak with you about your books. And I do encourage you all, go on Amazon or whatever and find Diana's books. They're going to be part of your library for a long time. Thank you all so much. We do have a Death Cafe coming up. The date's on there, I forget, August 17th at 7 o'clock. And that's where we have an open discussion about death and dying with non-political, non-religious overtones. So come and join us if you want to talk pragmatically about that. It's not grief counseling. It is really talking very nuts and bolts about what goes on for people around the issues of death and dying. And then we'll be back with more book chats and what's your plan, and a creativity program starting in September. We're going to skip August and just take a little breather. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the month. And I should put a note in for those of you who are also into literary, that Ellie and Carol and I are very much involved with the F. Scott Fitzgerald Festival coming right up. And if you go to F. Scott Fitzgerald Festival, you will find it online. There's only one, and we do it here in Rockville. It's going to be on Zoom. So from wherever you are, you can attend events. So with that, I will say thank you all again, and have ease. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you.